Hi guys, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to do the Tribulation series questions. Now, there is a bunch of questions, excuse me, there are a bunch of questions that have been coming up about the Tribulation series. This one actually was presented by my son. He was thinking, what is it going to feel like in the tribulation, even later on with that? What will it feel like when we have some of these things that we have lived with, predicted to have, and then they're suddenly gone? I think it's a powerful kind of lesson. This is not going to be a very long one, but it will give you a little background. Coming right up. Okay, so let me bring that puppy up on the screen here so you can kind of see. So we called it, the day in life of during the second half of the tribulation. Okay, so it's way more turbulent than you think, because we have people that think that they're going to like survive through the tribulation. I'm going to show you that there's actually an interesting show, and I won't be able to like detail it because I don't watch TV very much, and I've only caught pieces of this thing. And again, it was years ago, but it was like, you know, um, preppers, and these are people who like prep for their, their existence in a world when everything goes to basically hell in a handbasket, right? And then they would have like professionals come in and kind of say, well, your water filtration is not good. You don't have enough ammo. You don't have enough of this. What happens with that? And the reality is, when you see what I'm going to show you, it strips away everything. And you're going to find that so much is messed up. There's just no way to make it through. Matthew 24 says that if if we didn't limit the days, no flesh would survive. As I've used this reference before with Dr. Jeff Swanson, he will say in a slightly different pattern, if the day was going one day longer, and we are so close to giving you the timeline, it's about ready to be uploaded as soon as we kind of finish it up here. But if we extend the day one more day, no one's going to make it in essence. And so that's kind of what I want to show you a little bit about here with that too. Okay, so we want to start off again with a basic timeline. We're going to a little more focus upon the second half of the tribulation because that's germane to our point. Okay, beginning of the tribulation, middle, Rosh Hashanah. This is the day the Lord shows up in the clouds. Revelation 14:14, Revelation 14, 16. Yom Kippur, which would be the great day of the wrath of the Lamb. This is when the massive earthquake occurs, and I mean, it's a really extended day. We actually did something on our, Dr. Jeff and I were talking yesterday, and we were, discussing back and forth, like where to move a couple things, and we don't always agree with everything, and there's nothing wrong with not agreeing with everything. And he even said that too. And yet, well, one thing we definitely agreed on is, and I don't have it right here, is we took that little line right here and made it really fat. It's because that day will actually be extended. So it's a really powerful point that happens relative to that day, which is in it's a foreshadowing from the Joshua long day, and that actually comes up several times, but one of it's in Zechariah, where that gives you this. But we have the pre-tribulation rapture of the bride of Christ, so we have to have that coming in involved here. Okay. Again, I've always said Ezekiel 38 and 39 war is one of the most fascinating wars that you can come up with. This is the pre-war point. So we get into that in the Hope in the Last Days series. These actually come up as the second and third video. You can actually watch that on this YouTube channel. Go to Hope in the Last Days playlist, and you can see the second and third of those. And I explain those a little bit more. Now we are going to do a set of episodes called The Groups, and we're going to talk about the who's that are in the Bible. Very unique that we'll do that. And we'll finish it after we kind of get into that one. It'll have its own playlist with that too. Now, the beginning of the tribulation has to start. I don't care who you are and what you believe, but the Bible indicates over and over again. Daniel 9:27, 2 Thessalonians 2 through 12, uh, uh, Revelation 6:2, Revelation 13:1. I mean, I could just go on and on and on, but those are the big ones that we want to hit. It has to start with the Antichrist. AC. That's my little thing for him. So the Antichrist is that beginning because he signs a peace treaty with Israel for 7 years. He breaks it in the middle of the tribulation. Okay, and it says for a week. When we get into longer conversations in Daniel about a week, that is really meaning a 7 year uh, time frame point. In the middle of the week, he's not saying like 3.5 days later of a 7 day period. It's really the halfway point of the tribulation with that too. That he breaks and he messes up the abomination which causes desolation, which is one of the cool questions we'll bring up in another episode. Okay, so the false prophet's the second dude. He gets a massive, ugly guy inside of him, and his job is to create the image of the beast. The image of the beast is really important, and it brings the worship back to the Antichrist. That's why no one can actually get the mark of the beast just happenstance. We talked about that with this Chang Wong character in the Left Behind series that gets the mark of the beast, but he never worships it. It doesn't really follow along with that point because the worship of the Antichrist through the mark of the beast has to come. Now, when we get to the middle portion of the tribulation, and again, I'm not telling you the exact moment in time because no one has the exact this date. Okay, it we see in that middle portion of it there is a mark with a worship point required. Now, we also have the second seal, and if you notice, there's a significant time lapse between there because there are things happening in the world. But when we kind of look at what that World War III is, it is a massive destruction. It follows up with, and I call it a tetrarch, a three-prong point. The, the third seal actually talks about famine and hyperinflation. And you think we're in hyperinflation in 2020 to 2024? We aren't in hyperinflation. We are in a faux type of hyperinflation. If hyperinflation were absolutely 1000% real, was unsustainable, they would be raising your taxes to a level that could be unsustainable. And that's when you drive people into complete destitution. Don't get me wrong, lots of people are struggling in that way. But the destitution that will happen in this particular thing and the famine that comes around with it will be hundreds of millions of people starving even in non-third world countries or developing countries, as some people want to say, but in the mainline countries too. Okay? And then we have the pale horse, which is a quarter of the planet dying. It talks about plagues, but it also talks about wars, plagues and wars. So these things, by the way, when war happens, you're going to get famine, you're going to get hyperinflation because they're going to mess with the currency with that, and you're going to get 25% of the people dying. That could be as much when we just do some basic calculations, maybe 1.5 billion people. If we have anywhere from, a little bit higher on some numbers, people want to say a 500 million people might leave the planet with the bride, maybe 700 million. I mean, you can come up with your own numbers. If you hate my numbers, fine. We start subtracting from the 8-ish billion people, we might come up with 25% of the people dying in these kinds of tetrarch points. And we have maybe 1.5 billion. This is a huge circumstance of war. Now, when we kind of look below, and we also see, by the way, the seals of the martyrs. The fifth seal is a powerful seal. It's really a second half area because what we see is they're dying for they're not just dying for the heck of it. They're dying for their belief and they're dying for their testimony in Christ. Testimony, the basis point of the word in Greek, means has a martyr point inside of it. When you look at words that are listed in the New Testament, one of the most powerful areas is John 19:35, where it talks about truth, and it says true in four different ways, and in this like basically two sentence verse, and those words are talking about martia, uh, martio, and what those are is that when you give your testimony, you easily have the potential to die because of your testimony. That's where it gets this concept of martyrdom with that too. Now, these people will be dying. There will be massive numbers of people dying because he's killing off people. Now, we come back over here in the purple area. If you notice, I keep that purple kind of theme kind of going. The purple theme here with 144,000 young Jewish men that begin. We then move into the severe deception with the mark. So again, the mark is sort of coming out here, with that. We have a severe deception. This is in Matthew 24, where it even says that even the elect would be, severely compromised based upon the deception that happens. And it says, if it were possible. It means that these people are sealed in Christ in necessarily in their heart. These people over here are sealed that cannot be killed. These people that will believe in this time frame, I refer to them as the elect, the ekletos, or the chosen. Those are guests at the wedding, and we will get into that a lot more in another part of the next parts of the series. Okay, Satan does have to be God here because he dies. There is a point of death that happens in here, and he dies somewhere in the middle-ish time frame. He is not dead, and there's like a conversation of a sword wound, and then he comes back to life. But this is when in Revelation 12:12 it says, "Woe to you, earth! The devil has come down with great wrath, knowing that his time is short." And that's what happens with the wrath points, and that brings on some of these wrathful points. These seals have to be only opened by Jesus. They are only controlled by Jesus, which Jesus is the only one that has the capability of introducing the Antichrist. No one else ever can do that. Now, the next one is the trumpet of hail and fire. At that point, we have hail and fire hitting the planet that a third of all the bush kind of things and trees are burned. But all the green grass goes too because of this really weird hail type fire. The second one is a second trumpet. These are presented by, real interesting part, they're presented by an angel blowing a trumpet. There are incense that comes out of these points of the trumpet, but there's also a point of blood, a third of the blood, and we have a third nature that keeps coming out as a concept in here. And what happens here is that a comet comes down and has volcanic eruptions everywhere. So massive, massive destruction. Then we have another point of a meteor which gets a third of the waters bitter. Again, we get that third kind of thing. And then we have another point that we would have a third of the darkening of the planet, the darkening of the moon, darkening of the sun, which is going to make major problems. And if you notice, they're like sitting beside each other. Well, they could easily be related in this area. They could be related. Some of this stuff is happening, and more are dying, maybe here, maybe here, maybe here, related to some of this. Okay? And then we have the fifth trumpet, which I call the murder trumpet, the zombie trumpet, and we have many more hundreds of millions of people who are killing themselves trying to get away from it, but they can't die for 5 months. But guess what? If you have no blood in you and you've jumped off a roof and you've had a death experience, are you going to survive after the, this issue of your the lifting of the fifth trumpet of the 5 months? Would you still be alive? Well, guess what? The sixth trumpet comes in, and I'll show it here, but the sixth trumpet would come in and it would actually have another, I would call it World War IV, which is a now third of the planet dying, which could be as much as well, the first one is 1.875, and the second one could be 1.5 million. So we get really crazy numbers of people. Now, I just want you to think you're in the second half of the tribulation. So we're going to go back one half step here, okay? You're in the second half of the tribulation. A third of the land is burned up. You got volcanoes going everywhere. A third of the water is bitter. Now, I kind of proposed there's lakes or there's rivers, maybe in China. But again, India, China, it could be those places. It could be in Americas. Probably not, because we don't have a third of the population, but that's why it's put more in the Asiatic regions with that too. But then we also have a third of the darkening kind of thing that happens. So put that in your brain for half a second. If you want to take a piece of paper and write it down and just say, these are the things that are out there. Okay? Now, present the next phase of this. When we kind of move into, like, I'm just using sports and entertainments, which is a powerful thing for almost everyone out there. So we have the before. This is before tribulation. Okay? What do we have? We have social media channels that in relative freedom before Nasara and somewhat reduced in the, we have during the Nasara time frame, we have some level of freedom. We're going to see an increase of freedom or a reduction of some of the problems that come with social media with that too. And this is just where we are in this phase. Okay. TVs, channels with variety shows. Now, I could expand that into YouTube channels and Rumble channels and, just a million different ways of streaming kind of things that come out. See, and we go into this platforms and we talk about these Hulus and we talk about Netflix issues. And I mean, there's just a million ways to kind of get content. Even of older kinds of things like the Carol Burnett show, you can kind of get that on a Plex server and actually see them for free. They have a couple ads in there, but this is what is available to you in that way. And it preoccupies the people in a million ways when we look at that. Now, there's new technology showing up all the time. New types of iPhones and iPads and new types of computer systems with cool microphones or cool video equipment. We have gaming consoles that offering massive amounts of content. We have these massive games that are played online, and there are actual situations. For instance, Call of Duty is just one of those major ones. Do you know that some kids are getting scholarships to play these online games because they're so good at that? And they actually bring in huge amounts of revenue for the advertisers, and it becomes something to show to watch them play in different ways. I mean, it could be for Madden football things. It could be for all kinds of crazy little things, but there's online content and so much availability in there to look at that stuff. And so we have that in the background. And then I'm just going to go into this one. There's sporting events everywhere in college and pro. These streaming platforms, Amazon jumping in the middle of it, saying that they're going to have a playoff game of the NFL in 2024, 2025. We're seeing a lot of this way of doing this. So you can actually get the NBA app, you can get the NHL app, you can get the college, you can get, you can do this on DirecTV, you can get this on Cox, you can get this in different ways of having your streaming ability or your platforms to be able to watch this stuff, right? So we have, and obviously go to the games where, tens of thousands of people are there, 50, 60, 80,000, 100,000 people are in these stadiums. And it is the foci of a lot of these people in so many different areas, and you're seeing all this stuff, right? Okay, we all know that. After, again, think about your point, what we're thinking about here, how we're looking at the second half of the tribulation. Here's what I'm going to predict, and just as a concept afterward. Social media might just be eliminated fully. Why would the Antichrist want his information not shared? If the false prophet is putting together a severe deception, why would he allow any social media to accomplish anything? It's a powerful thing that you have to understand. If you think we're in the tribulation and we supposedly have an antichrist or an antichrist beast system or whatever you want to say, and you tell me, well, that's the case, well, and you say, well, we're restricted. A lot of us are restricted. Yeah, I've told you, I've mentioned that here before. But the reality is, they would completely eliminate any social media ability. You don't want to have the competition on YouTube or any other place telling you the opposite message of what they would want to do. Oh, fascinating. I mean, are you be able to get your content out? People are going to lose, whole positions and whole abilities to be content influencers in different ways. TV channels might be limited to just the pure fake news. Now, you get upset about fake news because then you can go over and see real types of news or clicks on different areas on Rumble and other platforms, and even YouTube will do this kind of thing too. But you can have these contents that are opposite of the actual real news channels that try to foist themselves up as the only point. But if you start eliminating the social media, now the channels might just limit themselves actually to fake kinds of news. Whatever they want it to be is the process and procedure of those particular sources. So now you see a limited nature of understanding. Now, I'm going to share something with you here before I get too fully into that. Well, let me back up one half step. But I believe that there's going to be websites, and those websites are going to be God level protected. That information's going to be getting out there. But I would not say that they would be social media in any way, shape, or form. And so, I think they'll be trying to figure out a way to hack into it, but they won't be able to, because we're going to have angelic kind of hosts protecting in many ways with that. So there's a way for that content, the right kind of content, to get out, but it's going to be incredibly. You're going to have to search for it if you happen to be in that time frame. Okay, movies. Why would they be making movies? I mean, you can come up with a reason for how they're going to make movies, but if you're trying to survive, do you really have time to go to a movie theater? I mean, you're just trying to eat. You're trying to get water. You're trying to have sanitation. You're trying to have, protect your family from marauders. Do you care about the movies? You probably won't. Now, there are series I think that they might put out there, which would be a part of the agenda, would be grotesque realities. I've kind of played around with this idea, and I've kind of put this out in the Foretold book 1 and 2. I actually kind of brought it up a little bit more, and how we lived an undead life, that you can see at drscottyoung.com, these books that you can kind of get. But I think the reality shows that have already been gross. They're going to go to a gross level you can't possibly imagine, where we're actually killing saints. We're actually killing the Jews. These are the agendas that they would want you to see with that. Fascinating kind of thing. And the bloodlust that might show up because of that would embolden people to go to new heights. There's not going to be new technology and new gaming. They'll have AI. I think AI will actually have a role in this. But saying robotics are going to be around, not going to have an ability to have anyone having robotics, but AI could actually be one of the most powerful and strongest vehicles for the image of the beast. Now, I talk about this in a book called The 144,000 with that. And that really gets into that idea. But then we also say, would gaming be around? I mean, for a little bit. I mean, maybe in the beginning of the tribulation. But when you get to the second half of the tribulation, I mean, you're again, on a survival mode. Would you get on the computer if you were part of the Mark of the Beast and just seeing, the series that they have available to you, or the content that you need to know, the absolute news channels that they're telling you about? Or are you looking at what the 144,000 saying, and then later on, the two witnesses? how would you find out information with those things? You're really limited. You're trying to get the basics to survive with that. Sports are going to fade away. There's actually real good storylines. There are fictional kinds of things that happen. We actually, one of the most powerful fiction points that have actually come out is the Star Trek series. Now, we see this played out not in the original series. We see this a little bit talked about in the Next Generation. But I'm going to tell you one of them that talks about this more than anything else is Star Trek Deep Space Nine. In there, their commander, and who's the captain, Captain Sisko, is a massive baseball fan. And they talk about how, and they give you some background story. And then there's some other non canonical kinds of series or fictional books, audio books, that will tell you about how the games, I mean, games of baseball and football, they just faded away because of World War III. And then obviously, we have the Vulcans coming and it moves them into the new Federation kind of thing. But it's a real interesting postulate of saying, hey, listen, when you can't deal with this, anything but this point of living, do sports have any meaning in that way? And I would say at that point in time, there's just the stadiums aren't for sports whatsoever. It's for the propaganda. Okay, let's move over to another conversation of energy production and blackout. Before that kind of time frame, you have a complete ability to travel on rails, air, car. I mean, you can go different ways. It's not a problem. Energy production. Reduced sometimes in the pre-NESARA timeframe, I believe that it will increase very dramatically. We're in 2024, February 2024. We're going to see a massive increase of that time of the production of energy in different ways. And I could go on and on about this, but just give you a little brief thing. Do you know that Iraq has a huge amount of oil issues, but they actually burn off in their refineries, and they will burn off natural gas. I mean, I'm talking burn off, just blow it away. How could that actually impact the European nations as well as other nations? It would reduce that price. So at that, well, guess what? That's available. We have it available pre-NESARA. We'll have it in a post-NESARA time frame, but it's a real powerful kind of idea that it's out there. Internet capability is possible. They're at massive speeds. And even Elon Musk is talking about Starlink. Now, I'd heard about Starlink. We've a lot of us heard about it. But my sister, who lives in a small town where there's nothing around, she's got Starlink, and she gets pretty darn good speeds. So they're available, and they're launching up satellites left and right with it too. Okay, so you have a lot of that capability. The living with rent, more home buying, I think is going to happen much more and much more capable post NESARA or after NESARA kind of comes in. But that stuff, you're going to see a lot of that stuff increase in that time frame. Now, juxtapose that, which is what we're seeing today, to a second half of the tribulation. War and plagues are going to kill production. It actually talks about in the third seal that wheat and barley are reduced or increased in inflation points. That's what it's talking about, the hyperinflation. But don't mess with the oil for the luxuries. It talks about the luxury points. That is talking about the super rich having availability for what they want. So it is going to massively separate poor, and basically everyone's either going to be poor or the super rich. It's going to flip it. Because in essence, we're not just going to communist level governance in the tribulation. We're talking about fascist level governance to a global scale with that. So guess what? Blackouts are going to probably pop up in cities. And in the 70s, during some of the oil crisis points, that was actually brought on because there was a bankruptcy in the 1970s that most people don't realize. The cabal was trying to bankrupt the people of America, and that was a payoff point that was happening. And we had rolling blackouts through New York City area throughout a lot of the 70s. So, well, take that as a picture point and see rolling blackouts happening city after city. And those rolling blackouts don't just last for half an hour or an hour and a half, it goes on for half of days to the place where no one really can be in there that can't operate any level of business because you can't stay open. And then, security systems go off, and then people go, you know what, I got to leave. So they move out of the cities. And then the blackouts become worse and worse. And when you have, nuclear level events going on, well, you might just shut off all the cities because you've lost all the production capability with that. And so we have loss of that. We have the countryside might have power and internet for a time, but when does Starlink kinds of things that I talk about over here, when does it give out? When is it taken over? When do you have to show your mark of the beast just to get internet signal? Right? We're talking about production ability. What if you can't buy? It says Revelation 13:16, but Revelation 13:18 is that you can't buy and sell without the mark of the beast. So you're not going to walk up to the gas pump and be able just to kind of pay with any kind of mechanism. You would have to pay with your mark of the beast, right? So when we go to that point, we say, all this stuff is going to be completely restricted. So while we see the countryside having the power internet for maybe a time, when do they start losing all that capability? Again, as we said, air travel is going to be almost impossible unless you have your own private plane. You can do it yourself. Cars will only go until the gas runs out. You're going to lose out all of that capability. When you see this kind of thing, how do you get resupplied? And people go, now I will tell you this. As we come to the end of this, what will occur is you'll see massive communal living. Now, when you kind of collectively bring people in, and this shows a little bit in the walking, like a Walking Dead series kind of thing. The point with that is, zombies hit, and then we have, the Walking Dead and all this other kind of gross things. But they kind of go into communal living where they can protect themselves a little bit more. Well, that actually makes you a bigger target. Okay, forget about the zombie thing. But it makes you a bigger target to go in, and we can take you out faster, right? Or the militaries would just go in and wipe you out. Boom. You don't even have to do a nuclear explosion necessarily. Just do a real localized type of, bunker buster kind of thing. And they even get you down who are slightly underground. So, people will be really trying to figure out any way of getting away from that kind of stuff. Now, again, that's the end of that particular thing. And I'm not trying to go on for a very long time frame, but I want you to kind of realize, as we pull this off the screen, as you kind of realize, how are you possibly going to make it in a tribulational time frame, and you believe that you're, the post-trib rapture point? I go, guys, I have looked at this, and there are powerful verses we'll get into, when we talk about the groups, but I don't see it. I don't see it because the scripture even says, if we don't shorten the days, no flesh would survive. So when you take away the niceties, you're just trying to everyday survive. And you become, we're going to see people who are going to look much more like a Holocaust victim than they're going to look like the healthy individual they could have been. And so they're susceptible when you get to that level of poverty and an inability to eat. You can't basically sustain yourself. And then you're really susceptible, like I said, to injury, susceptible to capability of having diseases come upon you. And so people are going to die in that way. And I know this is not very thrilling and fun to think about, but that is the reality of what happens. Realize this: if you're a believer in Christ, you're the bride of Christ. Your focus needs to be on what the wedding is, what the wedding ceremony is, what Jesus says. If I go and prepare a place for you, don't you realize I'm going to come back? John 14, verse 3. Um, he's basically saying, I'm the groom. This is a Jewish tradition. I'm the groom. My job is to go away and build a house for you. Now, if you read that as an American, as a modern citizen, you don't catch it. We go, well, yeah, he's going to build a house for us. That's great. No, that is not how it means. It means, yes, you're going to build a house, but why is Jesus building a house for you? It's because the Jewish tradition was you built a house for your bride. You are not allowed to come in. You're not allowed to go get your bride to go get married until the father said your house was ready. And once that 7-day wedding ceremony and the wedding feast is done, the bride and groom live for the next year without having to work. They get to know one another. I mean, they're taking care of themselves, but they're getting to know one another over that next year, and the community supports them. This is a very unique way, but he is building a house for her. That's what your goal is. That's where your situation comes. So hope that helps you, gives you some different perspective on this. I think it's a really powerful kind of way to look at that. Thank you so much.